Thank you very much, Timothy. Good morning, colleagues, and certainly permit me to extend my welcome to the doctoral program, and also for those of you who may be for your first time to the Virginia Union family and experience. Today, my task is to talk to you somewhat about constructive theology. And by constructive theology, I mean helping us to think critically and constructively beyond the orthodox theology that has been delivered to us, and delivered in such a fashion that it may engender the negation of our people and violate our responsibility for shaping the future that God has designed, desired, and decreed. To those of you who may have been in class with me before, some of this may be redundant, but I would suggest to you, as I say to them, if you want to study theology, take the class again next year. Because the reality is, and what many of us fail to understand, theology is never mastered, because theology is the articulation of the faith that it gives expression to your relationship with God. No relationship can be absolutely mastered to the degree that it is defined by the appropriation of categories that explain that nature. The bottom line is, no relationship is static. All relationships are in the state of becoming. A relationship that is static is no relationship, because it means somebody has been objectified, commodified, and defined, and their existence is determined by the box somebody has put you in. When that normally happens, the thrill is gone and you start looking for love in all the wrong places. The reality is, a relationship with God always has you on the tiptoes of expectancy, where you're ready to for God to teach you, stretch you, expand you, enlarge you, and take you to dimensions of understanding and existence that you have never known. In other words, in the relationship with God, there is always more. And the greatest threat to knowing God is when you think you know God so well already that God becomes what you know. And the end result is you begin to practice an idolatry that serves your doctrine, your discipline, your denomination, or even your book, rather than living in a powerful, dynamic, inspiring relationship with God that always has you seeking to find more ways and more effective ways to communicate the nature of God. I would very well say to you that you ought to be able to look at your sermons or things that you've written, and when you go back to them, rather than saying how awesome you were, you may need to ask for God's forgiveness. That actually my construction was a function of my limitations of that moment. And oftentimes, our construction is in fact what we got from the book. Zora Neale Hurston said, learning without wisdom is like a load of books on an ass's back. Did y'all hear that? Learning without wisdom is a load of books on the back of a donkey. Other places I've seen it on an ass's back. One of the things that wisdom gives you is that you're not as smart as you think you are. That you are not finished. God is with you. I've been doing this for over 50 years, family. And my joy and what keeps me alive is when I arise in the morning, I ask God, surprise me today, stretch me, teach me. God, help me to see what I've been missing. In the very real sense, the challenge for you in some ways, it's not to see your continued study as a terminal degree, but rather as a launching encounter. That somehow I'm blessed to be in relationship and association and really privileged by God to enter into, and I'm going to say this, a worship moment where I offer myself to an opportunity where God can enlarge and stretch me, not so that I can have alphabets behind my name, so that I can be better equipped to be faithful in the calling to which I've been called, such that because I have been faithful in worship by investing in study, the world will be a better place, and somebody else is going to be blessed and be the beneficiary of my privilege at Virginia Union. That my desired outcome is not self-promotion, but to glorify God in a being that reveals the heart and nature of God to the degree. Now, this may sound somewhat, so a lot of people have a problem with this, to the degree that when you operate in your fidelity, those who experience the gift of your mind, person, and spirit will simply say, the Lord is in this place. The Lord is in this place. And too many of us have been educated, well, more appropriately, trained. Paulo Freire talked about this, but I love what Naeem Akbar said. He said that the tragedy is that too many Black people have been trained and not educated. He says when you are trained, you are tutored in how to function and act to serve somebody else's need. To use another philosophical category, that you become monads, that where you are trained for a utilitarian purpose in a mercenary nexus, where you're commodified and objectified so that you will be the instrument in the enhancement of somebody else's possessions, privilege, or purpose. In other words, even as you are being prepared, you're being prepared to be an agency of the very reality that has tried to destroy you and negate you. And then you step out of that and leave that to do the work of the oppressor so that you shape other people to think like an oppressor. Now, I think Dr. Williams was with you all on yesterday. Was Theron Williams with you all on yesterday?
Yes, sir.
And he talked about the book that he's writing, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And you know, he interviewed me in that book, and we've had several conversations. I'll be talking to him tomorrow. Let me just share with you from something from that writing that will build a bridge to what we are going to do today. He notes in the chapter where he interviewed me this: Dr. Kinney challenged the subtitle of this book, arguing that while that white evangelicalism does not control the Black church, but it corrupts the Black church. The term control cedes too much power to white evangelicalism and minimizes the identity, resiliency, and potency of the Black church. Dr. Kinney explains the complicated origins of the Black church and how it was brought forth, and I won't go into that. But contrary to the popular suggestion, the earliest Black church in America was not the expansion of a brand of Christianity imposed on enslaved Africans by the slaveholders. It was actually a conversion. They were not converted to Christianity. They converted Christianity into a theological experience that transformed the very nature and message of the Christian story. Kinney maintains that while he was educated in Black theology, he had been trained as a professor to embrace the normativity and legitimacy of the white academy when it came to necessary content, pedagogical style, appropriate assessment criteria, and required orthodoxy. Those with a different perspective, energy, imagination, and journey had to be corrected and fixed so that they would be decent and in order and conform to the categories, conclusion, and constructs of the academy. Waving the banner of demand and disciplines, excellence became full participation and exercise within the domination system, and intelligence was measured by your agreement with or your sycophant adulation of the instructor. Did y'all hear that mouthful? This, how I have acknowledged, even in this, what he's writing, how you can become a part of it. Let me just go on to say this. Kinney admits that having taught such theology in his early professorship, he thought he was being liberative in his teaching by using Black history as a source for a social critique. But he admits that he did not done deep enough into the theological analysis. And therefore, I begin to construct theology based upon what I had been taught in PhD studies and all of that. Now let me push on just to begin to suggest how we have to move beyond this. While serving as a professor at a historically Black seminary, equipping mostly African-American clergy to serve the Black church in the community, he was a pastor of a Black church. These capacities allowed him to undergo what he called a metanoia of consciousness. That is, an alteration of his core concerning the meaning of faith existence and spiritual evolution informed his intellectual transformation, while his intellectual growth nourished his spiritual development. Hear this. He explains, one cannot grow in their relationship with God without one's thoughts categories changing. And when one's thoughts categories change, one is open to receive the revelation of the dimensions of God that you never believed that were possible. Now, I'm going to say a couple more things. Part of my own growth came not from the academy, but from the elders. I begin to sit with seasoned sable saints and discern from their wisdom. I had an elderly woman in the congregation who was 106 years old. Everybody called her Aunt Marie. Her picture hangs in my study. I pastored a church that I was there 2 years left and went to teach in Chicago at Chicago Theological Seminary. And then I came back, and I've been called by the same church twice. I'd been there 2 years, and when I left so quick, there were many people in the church who were upset and say, see, I knew we should have never called you in the first place because you was gonna leave us anyway. You got your sights on something else, blah, blah, blah. Miss Marie took my hand and she sat down with me in the first pew on the left-hand side of the congregation. And if you know the history of this church, the church is in a place called Negro Foot. It's called Beaver Dam now, it's Negro Foot. It's where they cut off the appendage of runaway slaves and hung them in the trees to intimidate anybody else from seeking freedom. She set me down and she grabbed my hand. And she said, my son, it's okay. I prayed when you came here. And God told me you was the one. And she said, son, I've been upset because you're leaving. I felt like you weren't serious about us. And God told me that you is supposed to go to Chicago because God wants to show you something. And she said, son, you go and you're covered with Aunt Marie's prayers. But son, let me tell you something. When you goes up there, don't you let them white folk change you. Because you are one of the few educated men I know who still knows how to think. Can I be honest with you? What she said went right over my head. I didn't understand it. But it helped connect me with something. I see Jerry here in Chicago. I refreshed my relationship with her dad, and the seeds of a lifelong relationship were planted and continue to flourish. But I remember he roasted me one time, and he used a story I told when I was in seminary, you all. When I was in seminary 53 years ago, I got hyped about Black theology because Black theology had just come out. James Cone had just written this book about Black theology and Black power. And so there was a group of us who formed a little association, and we formed ourselves to help the Black church be Black. Because we were on fire, and the Black church ain't Black enough. And you got to get Black, and you got to show and all this other worldly stuff. The Black, you got to get Black. There, we went to Virginia State, and of course the students got hyped. But I went to a congregation in Church Hill, Mount Tabor Baptist Church. I'm trying to remember the pastor's name. White-haired man. He taught Old Testament. He was kind enough to invite us to come. And I was a theologian in the group, and one of them talked about administration, the other one talked about preaching. I talked about theology, and I was doing my Kinney thing. Come on, you got to understand. See, if you do a Forbachian analysis of this and and you got to understand the Marxist critique of social determinism, you got to understand, blah, blah, blah. When I'm doing all this, the folk are looking at me. First, they just stare. Then they stop looking at me and start looking at each other. Then, all of a sudden, I saw them twist in their seats and start talking to the person behind them. Come on. And the whole time, I'm getting a little more upset. I'm talking, you've got to understand, and your Christological understanding is predicated upon a descending Christology that negates the blah, 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 your dosignal, and we got to get Black. And I'd throw in a Black reference or something, and Black. When I finished, the pastor, he said, we want to thank these young men for coming to us. And I feel a need for prayer. He called on one of his deacons to pray. And the deacon, in the liturgical style of the Black church that we fail to recognize, because when you're constructing theology, don't go to the book, don't go looking for a book. Analyze how they pray. Analyze the theological that's embedded in their prayers. Even, I'll tell you something else. In the old days, you had to listen to their jokes. You had to listen to the stories they tell. And I may share with you some and begin to unlock in the folklore, the theological content that literally says to an imposed structure, that's not what I believe, and that's not what I stand for. Don't ever say they didn't have a theology. We'll say more about that later. But when he got up and prayed, He said, this evening, my Heavenly Father, I thank you that you've brought me through another day's journey. Oh Lord, I thank you that you've privileged me to see the western sun one more time. And I thank you for taking me through this day, keeping me from hurt, harm, and danger, and being my seeing eye around every blind curve. God, I thank you that tonight I can go home with a roof over in my bed, over my head, and lay down in a familiar bed. And I thank you, God, that I can claim right now that I will rest well, rise in the morning with the blood still running warm in my veins. Thankful that my sheet was not the winding cord of a grave cloth. And I've got enough strength to wake up and say howdy and praise the Lord one more time. Thank you, God, for being a mighty good God. And then he went on to the typical thing. And God, I'm so glad that you sent your darling son, Jesus, down 40 and 2 generations of time. He walked the dusty streets of Palestine 30 and 3 years. He made the lame to walk, the dumb to talk, the blind to see, and raised the wretch like me. I'm so glad I've been washed in the blood of the crucified one. And then he went on, and he kept praying. And then at the end, he said simply, Lord, when it's my time to stand by the chilly waters of Jordan and hear the voice of Peter to bid me to get on board, Lord, let me walk across the sands of time, walk down the gangplank of salvation, and just as soon, Lord, as my feet strike Zion, I'll praise you. And he went on. But then in the midst of this thing, he said, and look, he said, and Lord, these people, Fugibaka, I don't know. Lord, Tilichi, I don't know. Lord, Marx, I don't know. But there's a name I know, and I ain't heard his name all night long. And I feel like I need to call him right now. And for about 3 minutes, he said, Jesus, oh, Jesus, Mary's baby, Jesus. And by this time, everybody in the place is up shouting, yeah, Jesus, Jesus. He finishes, and I'm mad. I'm mad, y'all. Here I am with a bachelor's degree, graduating with honors, with a comprehensive approach to the study of social studies. Here I am in a master's program. This 5th grade educated deacon says something and y'all shout. When this man who knows all this stuff, y'all turn your back on it. I'm mad. The hell's wrong with you all? Wrong with the church? After I finished, an elderly lady walked up to me. She put her hand on me, right in the center of my gut, right below my heart. And she said, young man, can I tell you something? You need to hear me and hear me well. And she pushed and she said, I see it. I see it. God's got a fountain bubbling in you. But hear me well. If you want us to drink from your fountain, you better learn how to bring the water in a cup we recognize. Again, it went right over my head. But now I have come back to recall all those moments where God was stretching me through the voices of the elders. See, my response to her when I got back with my crew, who bringing the cup, that's what's wrong, the cup, and we just defended each other. It's almost like Plato's myth of the cave. That is, when you're blind and you can't see, and somebody goes out and tells you there's a world different from the world of the shadows in your cave, and they come back and tell you, you don't hear the one who is bringing light. You get with your buddies who are just as blind as you, and you reinforce each other's blindness. From a homiletical perspective, do you remember when Jesus met a blind man, and he took him out of the city? When I preach that, first of all, it says his friends took him. And you always want to make sure you got some friends around you who want you to see. Because a lot of people who call you their friends want to keep you blind. Because if they keep you blind, they have the authority to be your only guide. I'm preaching a sermon this Sunday entitled Stay Connected, from Samson. It talks about the outline is the strength, the strength, the strip, the sorrow, and the salvation. How can you be so strong and then put your head in the lap of those who don't have your best interests at heart? That even strong people have vulnerabilities and frailties. And I just analyzed his strength, and I analyzed some dimensions out of his strength. That's why he's a hero. He puts his head in the lap of Delilah. I spent some time in the sermon talking about how we have violated Delilah because she was a victim. She was victimized by a male system who used women to get other men. And tragically, because men tell the story, Samson becomes a hero while she becomes a slut. And she was a victim in that story. The reality is that he comes out of it in deep sorrow. And here's one of the things that what happens when you put yourself in the lap of those who are not honoring you. Look at what they did to Samson. They put him at the wheel grinding. What usually does that? An ox. Whenever you cede your person to the power of those who don't have your best interest at heart, they reduce you to the animal position. You become the beast. Secondly, though, they put your eyes out. Come on. Why? As long as you have sight, you have able to have clear indication of what's being done to you. And also you have the possibility of seeing an alternative existence. See, people who want to victimize you never want you to see. They want you to keep you blind. And that's why they train you into blindness. They train you so that you accept the normativity and legitimacy of their worldview and their reality. I take your eyes out. I reduce you to a beast and take your eyes out. So from now on, your consciousness is shaped by what I tell you it is and not a power other than us. But here's the key thing. Then they paraded him out to laugh at it. Oh, come on. And after I get you where I want you, you become a joke. And I use you to tell you what you're not, and you ain't this, and she ain't that, and she ain't this. After I've used you, it's not enough to use you. I got to parade you out and tell the world how I got you. Are you with me, family? Okay. Look. But here's the thing. They don't say, we got you. Read it closely. We got your God. You have been doing what you've been doing by your express power of a relationship with God. And now that we got you, we've not only destroyed you, we've destroyed your God. They're not just trying to claim a victory over you. They're trying to define God. And the training process is to be able to them to parade you out. And while you are parading their theology, we have taken their God and given them our God. Our God is victorious. Are you with me? You see, in this way, our disconnect and putting ourselves in the hands of those who don't have our best interests at heart, we become blind, bestialized, and devoid of the God that gave us our strength in the first place. And we end up being the article of evidence for the legitimacy of their God. Now, look. But there's something you miss in the text when it was up there. See, he woke up and assumed, hey, I'll get my strength back. But guess what it says? The spirit had departed. He had entered in, and he was very sorrowful. See, this explains the character of the sorrow. But there's one line that says, his hair was growing back. In this sermon, I will conclude it by talking about that you still can be saved when you've lost your strength. Can I say, when they've made a fool of you in your pronouncement of faith, you discovered you may have left God, but God never left you. Make your bed in hell, and there, even there, I will be with you. You all know, and you've probably seen it somewhere, I did a lecture sermon on a low-down God. Most of y'all serve the high-up God. I serve a low-down God. Because God, when God found me, I was not high up, I was low down. And I'm so glad that the God I serve is low down. So low, he'll come down through 42 generations of time. So low, if I make my bed in hell, he'll be there. That God can save you in a hell bed. Thank you, God. That low down. In his low down moment, he said, what, Lord? Try me one more time. Lord, try me one more time. In the sermon, and I'm not going to do it here, I'm going to talk about his faulty prayer. He said, give me my strength one more time. That was a faulty prayer on two levels. First of all, don't ask for anything one more time. God, give me my strength, period. He limited his prayer because he purposed his prayer for revenge. Y'all see it? And when anytime your purpose is revenge, you are in self-destructive behavior because you've made the person with whom you seek revenge the object of your destiny. In other words, revenge takes you where your enemy is. And your entire understanding of your future is dictated by the enemy's location rather than your God relation. And if you only want revenge, you will kill yourself. You got to get beyond that and pray, give me my strength back. Because when I get my strength back, I ain't trying to get you. I'm trying to be faithful to the God who gave me my power in the first place. Because if I only want revenge, my lap is still in the head of someone who's inimical to my well-being. I'm not there anymore, God. They don't have it. So we understand that forgiveness is about your deliverance. White folk don't have me anymore, y'all. I ain't doing what I do to get back at white folk or to do something to white folk. I do what I do to be faithful to the God, that is low down. Amen. So that's just a thing. See, if you understand, see, that's part of the genius of the Black church, where some of us are missing it. And there are too many people in a liberation movement trying to get revenge. I will say this later. As long as you want revenge, you can never redeem. My purpose is not revenge, but redemption. Can I say this? I want to save white folk. I'm getting ready for a lecture that I got to do. I'm thinking about entitlement beyond Blackness, but to help people understand, I ain't getting beyond being Black, but you got to realize being Black ain't about just being Black. The only way these white folk gonna get straight is some Black folk got to be holy. Some Black folk got to bring the truth that transcends their own social location, behavior, and theological construction. And if I can't get beyond just doing a Black thing, I'm doing a world redemption thing. Here's my argument, and what I say this even in the book that Theron is writing. If we don't recover authentic Black theology and keep being controlled by white evangelicalism, we will not bring redemption to the world. We will officiate at the funeral of Christianity. So yes, as you all can see, I have some passion about this. I'm serious. Guess what? I'm serious about you all. About you all. When Jesus says, I send you out. And I send you out with power to heal. Can I tell you this? And to cast out demons, the demonic stuff that has controlled us and is controlling the church. Even to the sense, y'all listen to this. The Black church sometimes teaches Toby theology. You know what Toby theology is? Some of y'all heard me lecture about this. I've done it a couple places. Toby theology. You know what Toby theology is? You remember, y'all see Roots? And you remember when Kunta Kinte, his name was Kunta Kinte, and he was brave enough and bold enough to say, my name is Kunta Kinte. My name is derived from what my mother and father gave me. My name is derived from the ancestors who birthed me and blessed me. My name is an identity not derived by this social location or this condition of existence. My name is Kunta Kinte. Now, don't go out and change your name to an African name. That is not necessary, but understand the deep spiritual principle. Okay? All right. Believe it or not, I do have an African name. In Ghana, they assigned an African name to me. My African name is Mawuli, which simply means there is a God, or God is real. And what they say, when they put their hands on me, they said, your purpose is to reveal the real God, Mawuli. But do you remember they were beating him, and Fiddler went in to Master while he was being beaten. And what was Master doing? Played by Lauren Green, reading the Bible. Fiddler went in and said, Master, excuse me, Master, they really beating Kunta out there. And Master, I don't believe that good book you reading want him to be beaten like that. And the master said, Fiddler, get on out of here before you get what he's getting. Get out of here. He said, okay, Master, sorry, but Master, let Master, you know, Kunta a big, strong buck. You let him beat him like that, he won't be able to do the work that he does. Can I show you what we do? We'll look right over that. What the enslaved recognize, I cannot appeal to your humanity or your spirituality. I have to appeal to your economic self-interest. For what might engender an alteration in your behavior is never spiritual truth, but the benefit you're receiving from the commodity. Come on, you all, why don't we use things like that to teach in the church? Look. Why aren't we going to other sources and other images to help us to understand what we are called to do? But here's the thing. After they beat him and they kept beating him, Fiddler went out and they beat him until finally Kunta Kinte said, my name, Toby. And here's what the man beating me said, what's your name? He said, my name, Toby. He said, now you're a good nigger. Feel that. Ossie Davis and Ruby Dee in their book, their story, Ossie Davis talks about the process of niggerization. And we came to the point that he acknowledged he would never be niggerized again. He was stepping out of the niggerization system. Now you're a good nigger. But they cut him down, and Fiddler went to him and cradled him and poured water and salve on his wounds and said, he rocked him back and forth and said, they calls you Toby, but we's know you Kunta Kinte. We's knows Kunta Kinte. And in the cinematographic presentation, the scene shifted with his parents holding him up when he was born to the moon and the stars and saying, a gift from God. How many of us, under the impress of the lies we're being taught in the church, teaching and preaching Toby theology, rather than saying they call you Toby? They do these things. You see, I get upset. I read something this morning about how Black folk need to step out of victimhood into futurehood. You know, just black. No, that's, I gotta call this, not because I'm a victim, but I recognize if I don't draw your attention to the victim, how you were a victim, you will call yourself free and stay in victimhood. Come on. You'll be talking about you're successful and you still got shackles on your feet and shackles on your mind. You will be calling yourself successful. And in the language again of Naeem Akbar says that you can never be a slave until you give psychological assent to your chains and the system which enslaves you. Our ancestors were in bondage because they were in a perpetual quest for freedom. We are in slavery today because we are giving assent to the very things that enslaved us and become the agents of the enslavement. And he challenges even within the church. We have given psychological assent to our chains, and we become co-conspirators in their maintenance. And how do we do that in the church? Toby theology. Okay, y'all. And y'all forgive me if I get passionate, but if it's not your passion, don't do it. If it doesn't matter, don't teach. If you don't care, go to where you do care. So how we end up teaching this Toby theology, I want to challenge us to begin to think differently. And do you know who some of the people are who are really starting to articulate the disease of white Christianity? Let me go back in history first. Frederick Douglass. There is the Christianity of this land and the Christianity of Christ. To be a friend of one is of necessity to be the enemy of the other. That's in his narrative. He says there, the Christianity of this land. He says, actually, there's two religions in this land. Come on. There's the Christianity of this land and the Christianity of Christ. And if you're a Christian of this land, you can't honor Christ. And if you're honoring Christ, you cannot embrace the Christianity of this land. I love what Ida B. Wells said. Our American Christians are too busy saving the souls of white Christians from burning in hell's fire to save the lives of Black ones from the present burning in the fires kindled by white Christianity. Did y'all hear that? This is in that book, Crusade for Justice. So her story. Our American Christians are too busy saving the souls of white Christians. And the shift was, and the souls of Black Christians, and get the Black Christians to ape and appropriate their methodology and mentality in Christianity. That's the goal. Come on. That they're too busy trying to save folk from the hell's fire to save the lives of Black people who are presently burning in the fire kindled by white Christianity. James Cone in Cross the Lynching Tree, and I won't read what he said, but he said, Black folk don't got to go to seminary to understand something's fundamentally wrong with white Christianity. You don't need a degree to recognize that anybody who can practice this brutality and then claim to be Christian and invite you to be a part of their religion. He said, if you grew up in this system, you understood that from a child. That ain't God. Unless you were so mutilated, you allowed somebody else rather than God to define the character of your being and identity. Malcolm X put it this way, and that's where I talk about the requiem for Christianity. If the so-called Christianity now being practiced in America displays the best that the world that Christianity has to offer, no one in his right mind would need greater proof than what we are witnessing in white Christianity to recognize that the death of Christianity is close at hand. I don't agree with that because I believe there are enough people who understand the God revealed in Jesus Christ, stand up and fight. But if you want to, can I be honest with you? I have grandchildren that I love deeply. And any of you all who know me, I'm very close to my grandchildren, and I've always allowed them to say what they need to say to me. In fact, sometimes they give me too much information. You know, I don't really need to know about that date. I don't, come on. One day they were having conversations about Christianity related to sexuality, and particularly related to issues of LGBTQ plus issues. And they were asking me questions, and they call me Papa. so and so and so. And I'm talking about these are beautiful they're beautiful young ladies in appearance, but they're beautiful in spirit. They are just beautiful in spirit, but they're having real trouble. Even though they worship with Papa, they're having trouble with identifying as Christian. Because they are viewing Christianity through what they see Christians doing, conflating the Christian flag and the flag of the Confederacy. Come on. I gave an answer to the question. And my one granddaughter, both of them are school teachers, you all. One of them teaches in alternative schools. The other one is in elementary education. And I'm just amazed as when I hear them sit around and talk about the things they're wrestling with and struggling with in their reality, you know, even in the classroom. And my grandson was there who also works in alternative education. And one of them said, Papa, you know, that's a good Christian answer. So what kind sarcastically. And the other one, Giselle, said, no, that's some Christian bullshit. Now, y'all, and she said, Papa, when are we gonna love God enough to get beyond the bullshit? And here's Papa. And we had a wonderful conversation. But at the end of our conversation, I challenged them. I hear your concern. But you have just told me in this conversation that people are lying to you about the nature of Christianity and constructing a Christianity that devalues you. Why would you surrender Christianity to the liars? Rather than abandon it, why can't you speak this truth that you see? In fact, if you abandon it, come on, if you abandon it, you are ceding Christianity to the liars, because all of the truth seekers and truth tellers feel like they've got to leave. Is God calling you to leave, babies? Or is God calling you to be redemptive agents in the midst of the lies you're discerning? Can I just go back to that Samson story? What did Samson have to do? He was blind, and he went to a young man and said, show me where the pillars are. Do y'all understand? I've heard so many sermons. It's sad when adults got to ask the children, huh? That's how low you got. No. That's a profound statement and a scriptural revelation that any movement toward a meaningful future will be an intergenerational movement, and that some of the adults are so blind, it will take a younger generation to help you see how to tear this mother down. When my daddy got older and he couldn't see, he used to wear pieces of glasses. But my daddy would come to me, and he used to like to sew patches on his pants. And he'd be sewing patches, and he couldn't thread the needle. And he would come to me and say, come here, Billy, come here. I need to borrow your eyes. What I'm saying to the church today, we need to maybe have to turn to a younger generation and say, can I borrow your eyes? I've been so blinded by what I have been complicit in. I need your holy eyes. Help me to see. Help me to see. Now, somebody, I hear you right now. Some of you are going to write something about that. I just feel it. And y'all forgive me, but I just feel it. Somebody right now is percolating a poem, a rap, or something about borrowing the eyes. Praise God. Now, but as I move from that, guess what? It's not only that. Have you all been exposed to a book called White Too Long by Robert Jones? These are now white people who were from the Southern Baptist Church now writing about the racism they grew up and how that racism is still alive. Let me look at this. I'm going to read a quote from the book by Robert Jones. It is time, well beyond time, for white Christians in the United States to reckon with the racism of our past and the willful amnesia of our present. Underneath the glossy, self-congratulatory histories that white Christian churches have written about themselves is a thinly veiled, deeply troubling reality. White Christian churches have not just been complacent, they have not only been complicit, but rather as the dominant cultural power in America, they have been responsible for constructing and sustaining a project to protect white supremacy and resist Black equality. This project has framed the entire American society. American Christianity's theological core has been thoroughly structured by an interest in protecting white supremacy. And he's a current researcher and even has a think tank and a research center who documents this with current empirical evidence through interviews and assessment of Black white folks' responses in the white church. Now, can't go into lengthy detail, and I'm looking at my time, and I want to give you a break in about 20 minutes. We'll take a break and then come back, okay? Now, what I want to do now is that's the prolegomena critique. What does that mean? Prolegomena, the things which go before. When you're doing prolegomena in theology, you're dealing with your methodology, your sources, and your norm, and not in your doctrines proper. All I'm suggesting is that in theology, there's a prolegomena element where we have to begin to honestly look at how we approach and how we do theology and how we appropriate sources. I'm challenging those of us who are Black because a lot of us talk Black but still think white. That is, our mental constructs, the way we envision reality, even what we preach in the church is the same white theology. Amen. Can I get in trouble? And our heroes and sheroes are white evangelicals or Black folk who have been promoted by evangelicalism, who preach the same message, and you never hear them offer a prophetic critique of what they have been taught or the normative theological message offered by the Christian church in America. I'm gonna just say it, all right? I don't critique other pastors, y'all, unless we are in a context where we're dealing with each other. Why? Because I am not here to pull you down. I'm here for us to have an honest conversation to talk about total liberation and authentic freedom. Amen. We cannot escape how sexism and misogyny is still very much alive in the church. What we do in the Black church is built upon hierarchical categories, and that's why so many people want a title not to fulfill the purpose of God, but so they can have status and image and privilege in the church world. So that's why I'm very comfortable just being a little country preacher in Negro Foot, Virginia. Come on. With maybe 225 members. But we will touch the world. And I don't need a house or a title in order to be faithful, because I'm a firm believer, if you're faithful, God will give the increase. Now, I want the triangle. You all got that triangle that talks about theological categories? You got that sheet?
Yes, sir.
You got it? So I don't need to pull it up, right? Or, oh, no, that's the circular one. That's the conclusion. That's the doing away with. What I want is the triangle that talks about theological category that has an inverted triangle.
Mm-hmm.
You got that, Tim? Yeah, there it is. Look, you all. These are the traditional theological categories. You see, if you went to a seminary, I guarantee you they talked to you about these things, and their response to liberation was to throw in a book by James Cone or a Renita Weems, to throw in a black figure and then say, now that covers inclusivity. That covers it. We showed you how they talk about it, but let us now deal with theology. Now, on the left side of the triangle, as you look at it, you see what? Cosmology. That's your whole understanding of creation, how God created. What did God, who created? Right now, we have this James Webb telescope out there in deep space, and they're saying that they are going to be able to peer in the deep and identify, what do they call it? They call it the reionization epoch, when the first particles of the world were formed and how they came into being. I've even preached about this. I have no problems with the James Webb spatial telescope. I just don't come to their same conclusion. Because all I'm saying is your telescope tells me how. My faith tells me who. I'm not going to argue with your facts. I can even accept those facts, but you will never bring me to the point that I cannot testify and affirm my who. Because even after I look at all the facts, it is not only spiritual, but downright rational to say there must be a God somewhere. So I study science. I love science. You all will hear me speak sometimes, and I'll throw in a lot of scientific facts about how fast the earth revolves around the sun, maintaining the necessary critical velocity to keep the distance between the sun and the earth such that life could be sustained on this terrestrial ball. If it went 1 mile faster, we'd be hurled into outer darkness. 1 mile faster, we'd be drawn into the gravitational pull of the sun. And when I study the facts of science, which are amazing, and a physicist will tell you that there's a necessary critical velocity, then why and how? Why are we moving just so life can be sustained on this earth? What is the power? You're going to tell me just by happenstance, all this stuff happened and everything was created with the necessary order. That's sometimes called a theological argument for the existence of God that can be philosophically engaged, but that's not the issue. I stand in faith. Cosmology, God did this thing. But you notice when I drew it, see, can I tell you all this? This was going to be my corrective. Because normally the triangle is who's at the peak? God. Come on. God is up the top. I inverted the triangle. So let's look at it this way. God is not at the top. God is the base or the foundation for everything. Cosmology, you'd recreate it. Then it would immediately go to anthropology. What did the traditional discussion delete? Ecology. Because in traditional theology, the world becomes beneath the human. Come on. We have constructed anthropology where humans are the highest element of creation rather than a dimension of creation that must be connected with creation in order to flourish. So the humans are not above creation. The human is with creation. And what gives us our assignment is not to be above and dominate creation, but to be responsible for creation and to honor creation. And our assignment is to be responsible for the earth, not to rule over the earth. And our assignment is I put you in the garden to cultivate it, guard it, and till it. In other words, guess what? You are a 6th-day creation, not because of a hierarchy of value, like we use the man is first because he's created before the woman. If you use that logic and go back to the whole creation story, then you would have to say there are other things, the dirt, the trees, the rocks, the birds that are superior to the man because they were created through the 5th day, while you are a 6th-day creation. No. God does not create to create a hierarchy. He creates to create relationship and creates in a fashion to sustain flourishing. So if you're going to talk about cosmology, you got to talk about the goodness of creation and our assignment to live so that we engender flourishing. No, I even use this when I'm talking to young ministers. Wherever God has a garden for you, say God placed him in the garden. One of the biggest problems is, and the reason that you're struggling is because you've been placed by somebody other than God. You've been placed in relationships, you've been placed in pastorates, you've been placed, and it's not, you've never tried to discern where is God placing me? God has a place for you, and it's not a dump, it's a garden. I can use my own life as experience. When I stayed at Ebenezer and people start talking about, Kinney, you can be here. They want to call you, and I say, and I would always spend my time on my knees. And I said, I can't go where God has not put me. God put the human God created. Because you will never maximize your promise, your possibility, and your joy when you are put by somebody other than God. And the whole function of white supremacy is to put you in your place. For I'll be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave, and go home to my God and be free. You don't put me. Come on. We do what? Women, you are getting out of your place. Because I've established a system where I determine where you're placed you, but God in the beginning purposed you and placed you. He placed you and he purposed you. Make this fruitful. Relate to this place such that there's more life that comes out of it because you're here than there was when you stepped in here. So look, the anthropology, the next part of the story is what? Hamartiology or hamartiology. That from the Greek word hamartia, which means to miss the mark. That's the understanding of sin. I use the words fragmentation, separation to talk about really what happened in what we call the fall. And one of the things I've done is looked at creation stories in other religions and around the world. I'm not an expert in them, and I can't pull them out off my head like I can pull that, but just to see. Every creation story has some story of something that happens that causes separation from God. The people, there are stories in West Africa where the women were pounding fufu, and they pounded so much they got on God's nerve, and the land God became the high God. You understand? Now, come on, stay with me. I'm going to show you, I want to suggest in a minute, in my own writing, there is a brief article that I didn't give to you. I've used it somewhere else in a couple of weeks with another school. In 2 pages, I can show you what happened. It's what I call snakeology. It's when we let the snake dictate how we construct theology. The snake tells 2 lies. The first lie is God is threatened by you and wants to keep you down and make sure you stay in your place. Lie 1. If you read all the narratives, in the beginning, God was with you. Jesus Christ, Emmanuel, is not a new manifestation of God. He is the eternal manifestation of God, which is evident in creation. It says they walked with God. God was a with God, a relational God. The lie that the snake tells is God is threatened by you. Come on. He's above you and beyond you, and God wants to stay in place. The snake establishes the legitimacy of hierarchicalism as ordained by the character of God. Then the snake says, and you ain't much. You ain't much. You're not in the image of God. There's no value. There's no dignity in you. Now, so here are the 2 lies that are used to construct theology. And above God, who relates hierarchically, and a human being is deficient and no good. And all of Western theology is built upon that. Now, if you read J. Cameron Carter, Willie Jennings' Theological Imagination, J. Cameron Carter, a theological account of race, both of them start, J. Cameron Carter starts with the function, and he shows how the idea of separation between Gentiles and Christians engendered that Christianity was birthed on a separation concept. And it immediately set as its task not to meet you, but to fix you and change you. It established that you were deficient. One of the things in my own presentation, I did it a little while ago, some of you all heard that, dealt with that on the gift of Black theological education, that white theology starts with condemning you to convict you and convert you. And it uses the lie about you as the foundation for the work of the church, and is the principle of evangelism. Because look what it does. And this is what Carter picks up. It picks up is that first of all, you're wrong. You're no good. I have what you need to be fixed. You need Jesus. You get Jesus, you're fixed us, and you'll be one of us. And once you're one of us, you're okay. But if you're not one of us, we will make an effort to convert you. But if you don't convert, we will cleanse you. And if we can't cleanse you, which may even end up in genocide, we will at least contain you to make sure your kind does not infect us who are pure. But then he talks about how this gets racialized between Gentile and Jews, and how racialism extends through the history of the Christian church. Jennings talks about the fact of how Christianity became the handmaiden of conquistadors and conquerors. So it locates it in the period of expansion, that there's a shift in Christianity from being a message about healing and the hurting and delivering the healing, but a message about the chosenness, come on, of a particular group and their responsibility to destroy and to fix by force, if necessary, those who are deviant. See, I never encounter you as having intrinsic worth, dignity, and value. I encounter you as the other, that I'm the only one who has the power to fix. Now go back and look at the method of the snake. The snake tells two lies. You're no good. Does the Christian church meet you and affirm that you're in the image of God, or tell you you're no good? The church tells you that God is angry with you, and your problem is your pride, and you need to get back in your place. Come on. And so now you serve a God who is distant, who is to be feared, rather than a relational God who is with you. God is above you, and you're no good. And I'm arguing different from, and it's why people say you got to write this book, that it does not begin with the 15th century. It does not begin with the early Christian church. It begins with the very Old Testament that allows the Jews to conquer, violate, and destroy people in the name of God. And now we glorify the Old Testament as our foundation that is built upon murder, violation, and abuse. And we call that the way of God, because we are God's chosen. Now, look, family, you have these two principles of separation. God is above, God is below. So your anthropology always emphasizes your negated being and your deficiency. Do y'all understand it? And you heard that all your life. You're a wretch, you're a worm, you're a sin. And even those who had a more liberal understanding, because in the history of Christian thought, there are people with higher anthropologies, but they have always been considered the deviant and the heretical. Now, and if I go into the church and start talking about, rather than using Psalm 51, I was born in sin, I shapen in iniquity, woe is me, and I start using Psalm 8 and Psalm 139, that you are wondrously made, majestically made by God, a little lower than the angels, only like that language, lower than, you are made in harmony with the angels. God formed you, or 139, I knitted you together in your mother's womb, I knew you before you were born. If I start there, immediately if I expand the theology based upon that, see, you liberal. No, why can't I? You are selectively using scripture to legitimate a particular paradigm, which is fundamentally flawed in the beginning. And orthodoxy is established by how well you embrace the lie rather than speak the truth. All right, stay with me. I know this is kind of strong. You all can pray for my salvation when I finish. Okay, look. See, these two things, the two lies. Now we're constructing the theology on the law, lies. That's snakeology. Come on. Now, so when I do this, can I just make a current That's why it's so easy for a liar to be elected president. Why? Once you embrace the lie and you make the lie normative for your existence, and that lie affords you possessions, privilege, status, and power, you don't want truth, you want the lie. So therefore, the true godly person that the Christian church embraces is the biggest liar in the community, but the lie is telling you what you've gotten from the lie, and it maintains your power in the lie. So I want a lie. And even when the lie is exposed, I will not even acknowledge the truth. That's why I'm so afraid of CRT, critical race theory. Well, let's drop critical race theory and let's just simply say CRT, Christians reclaiming the truth. Let's say CRT, communities reaching for transformation. I am in the CRT because when it's tragic, when the truth becomes the basis of division, because maintaining your lie supports your division in the first place. And anything that threatens my division becomes the lie. And when you speak truth, I say you're dividing me. But when you speak a lie, you say I'm healing. My God, my God. See, this. I am committed to communal reaching for transformation. Christians reclaiming truth. That's my CRT. Critical race theory is just one of the elements that might help me as a Christian reclaim the truth. All right. Now, when y'all use that, footnoted, okay? No. I'm being bad now. So all of you all know it. I see several of you I've been had in class, and they just love you so much. I see Kari and Renita and some of you others who I've been in class with, and they know that Dr. Kinney is an old man, but there's a little boy in him that just loves to play. And I see you, Rosalind. I love to play, to just relax and say, the joy of the Lord is my strength. Hallelujah. God be the glory. All right, look. So once you believe the snake and start constructing on the snake, and that is the fundamental foundation of white supremacy, snakeology instead of theology. Premised on the above God and the deficient human. So now, this is just to show you how the theological system you construct. In the midst of your pit, that's your sin, you have a salvific figure who enters the pit of negativity and becomes an agent who's trying to restore you. Look at every world religion, they introduce a salvific figure that addresses what is symbolically called the fall. For Christianity, it's who? Jesus Christ, right? then the salvific figure provides your, in the Christian language, your soteriology. The Christology is his who, the soteriology is his do. What does he do? He atones. He is the instrument that provides salvation. Now I'm going to jump way ahead because we'll look at this after we take a break. Because of your snakeology, when you construct your Christology, your low anthropology leads to a high Christology that tends toward a docetism that negates the full humanity of Jesus. Jesus becomes a spirit or spiritualized. And because he's a spirit, he can't be black. That's blasphemy. Now, I'll push this even further. And you tend to negate his humanity, his condition of existence, his functional ministry, and make him a spiritual savior rather than embody truth who dares to contradict the lies. Emmanuel, God is with you. The lie is confronted. And not only that, God moves through human form. The human is not deficient. The human is the very place of divine activity. Can I get in real trouble for you, with you? Some of you have heard me do this, and it's got me consigned to hell because I'm saying theologically, Mary was not a virgin. I think I mentioned this even when I made my expressions at the Ellison convocation, which I didn't get to really do it all. But Ellison, in that Mary's not virgin because her consciousness is penetrated by a patriarchal world to the degree that when God gives her an invitation, she gives a human limitation and gives the power of her productivity to man rather than God. So therefore, she was not a virgin. The reason I do that, I don't want to talk biology, that's between her and God. And the purpose of the birth of Jesus was not to get humanity out of Jesus, but to get God back into us. For us to begin to discover that birth and life are God acts, and don't leave productivity just to the human. God is in this, that your birth is divine. Your existence is divine. You are an instance of virgin birth. You're a unique instance. And I can go in to describe how each and every human being, there's never ever been anyone like you and never will be another one out of you. You are a virgin presentation of the divine dexterity. You're the first of your kind, and there never will be another like you. That's why I have to be very careful how I treat you. Because even when I have a problem with you, I recognize you're a God gift and creation. So I have to deal with you with integrity. Look. Then you mutilate Jesus. Then you having dying with an Anselmian substitutionary theory of atonement and evangelicalism, where he is dying because of a plan of God, rather than the violent response of deceived humanity to God's presence. Let me make it plain. Jesus did not come here to save, to die. He came here to save. He died because of the violent way you responded to life-giving presence. I'm gonna say more about that later, but I'm trying to rush through this so I can give you a break in 5 minutes. Now look, then if your soteriology is your connection between your cosmology is your beginning, your eschatology you're in, your soteriology is the bridge between, come on, there's a book called The Bridge Called My Back, a womanist writing. the soteriology is the bridge between your cosmology and your eschatology. You have a cosmology where the connection with your future in your beginning is disrupted by your hamartiology. In the midst of the pit of your separation, there is a salvific figure, your Christology, and the pattern for the healing is your soteriology. Now, the people who are part of the redeeming community is the ecclesiology, and the power by which this vessel called the ecclesiology moves is your pneumatology, that the Holy Ghost, and we won't have time to talk about this, but I do a whole thing about why we ought to all be Pentecostal. Pentecostalism has been reduced to a reformation, a movement, or a denomination in the church, when the Pentecost is not about a movement in the church. It's about the very birth of the church, the very life of the church. And no matter where you locate yourself, you ought to self-identify as Pentecostal. And I'm a Baptist, but I'm Pentecostal, because everything I do right now is by the unction of the Holy Ghost. Now, you see it? Then traveling the bridge gets you to your future. You see how just begin to understand all of this system that you're being taught, and that system is teaching you what you ought to believe. You'll see over there when it gets to eschatology, utopic and dystopic. Y'all see that? Here's one of the real problems. Because you have embraced the snake, your future models the snake and not the God who created, because your future is a future of division. Look at the story. Jesus, God created everything relationally. We were one. The snake tells a lie and disrupts it. Jesus comes to heal and put back together. Come on. Wilt thou be made whole? But yet, when we conclude and reach the reign of God, what is the condition of existence in the future? Eternal separation. So the God who ordained eternal relationship, the Jesus who gave life to eternal relationship, is overcome by the snake theology, where you end up in eternal division. A hierarchical divisive system requires a heaven and a hell. But is that the construction of the God we've created, or the outcome of the future God is creating? Just a thought, and we'll say more about that. You see these words, aseity, that's the being of God. And here's how we talk about God. Trinity, theodicy, that's the problem of evil. Ponerology is the distinction between the problem of evil created by moral human action and the what is called third evil, the evil that cannot be explained rationally. And you wrestle with these things in God. Okay, team. What time is it? It's 10:30. Hey, right on the dot, according to my phone. Let's take 10, take a deep breath, get a drink of water, or whatever you need to do to refresh yourself. And we'll be back here at about 10:40, 10:45, and we'll go to the next charts. Okay? Okay, take a break. Say is, what we fail to recognize is that the hierarchy never really blesses anybody, because your need to negate somebody else is a function of your own self-negation, and it predicates a system where you will always be in conflict and in battle, because there'll be somebody above you trying to put you down. You see, and that's the big mistake we make with God, when God becomes a bloodthirsty, benevolent gangbanger who has to off somebody because he's been offended. Come on, think about it. Now, so when Everett, I don't separate the whole issues that confront men from the whole system of domination created by our deception and our embrace of snakeology, which demands a hierarchy, even in our relationship with God.
Now,
so we live by hierarchies. And there's a place for the man, there's a place for the woman, there's a place for the black man. Now notice, clearly in white supremacy, there is a kind of bestiality related, a beast, that the black man is a beast, and he is pathologized, demonized, criminalized, and he's viewed as a threat, both sexually, physically. Those are the key thing is. And I've got to keep him in his place. And I establish a police force not to keep the peace and to practice justice, but when it comes to these kind, make sure they stay in their place. So when I approach you as a tyrant. There's some reading. Someone just sent me a book yesterday that I got to get about the criminalization and pathologization of even young black men. But you can't make this gender specific, because in the hierarchy, our sisters face the same kind of objectification and abuse. And here's the sad thing about a hierarchy, Everett. Once we embrace the hierarchy that promotes us, you've also embraced a system that requires the victimization of your sisters. Because your strength is predicated upon her weakness. And when she's strong, she's a threat to you rather than a gift to you. Now, can I say this, Everett, and then I'm gonna move on? Okay. All of us as black men, no matter how liberated we think we are still trying to cast out the demon of sexism and misogyny. Even those of us who are quite open and receptive, it's just like racism. It is so endemic to our formation and our worldview that you are constantly trying to address it. Let me see, make it plain. Perfection is never a state achieved. It's a destiny pursued. And once you step out of the pursuit, I'm guarantee you, you have given authority to imperfection. That's the great tragedy of white supremacy. The norma tritict, that's why you say, make America great again. Why? You have already achieved what you think is great. Mm-hmm. So I don't have to pursue something in front of me. I don't have to dream. I monumentalize what's behind me. And so I build monuments. And so the monuments of my past are the embodiment of my future. And then we glorify arrested development and step out of the journey toward fulfillment. See, and it's the same way with God. When you love somebody deeply, and then come on, we'll get back into this lecture, and I'll do Rosalind Hall. Rosalind is a dear friend, and we still communicate. So Rosalind, I want to use you as a subject lesson, and that is, if Rosalind and I have a relationship, and I begin to say to her, Rosalind, you know, you ought to be glad to have a man like me. Shoot. Then you might say something stupid. Plenty of women would like me, because since she knowing Rosalind, she might say, well, go on to him. No, but but the thing is that the way I relate to you is like we've achieved perfection in our relationship. And the reason it is perfect is because I'm so good. Come on. And I start ticking off the things that I do that are so good. When I really have a deep relationship and love her, the language is like this. Today, I tried to love you and care for you the best that I could. But if perchance there was a moment I was insensitive, if that perchance there was a moment that I missed you, forgive me. That my claim is not about my perfection in the relationship, but my commitment to invest in the maximal possibility in the relationship. And the minute that I think I got it, I stop investing. And that's the tragedy of this country right now. We think we had something rather than acknowledge that there are places, there are seasons, there are moments. And I recommit myself to pursuing the possibility that exists for us. That's why when I'm teaching, that's why Jesus asked for forgiveness. See, that's another fallacy. Jesus never asked for forgiveness because he didn't have, no. Forgiveness is not the prayer of a sinner. Forgiveness is the prayer of those who will not let sin rule on the thrones of their heart. Can I say this? I can imagine and experience Jesus after a day with his disciples going away. And when he taught us to pray, he said, ask for forgiveness. And then I was taught that was not the Lord's prayer, that was the disciples' prayer. And the reason it's the Lord's prayer, because he asked for forgiveness. No, it's the Lord's prayer. At the end of the day, he said, Lord God, today was an awesome day, God. God, I felt your power move. And I experienced the fullness of your presence and glory when that lame man walked. But today, God, Peter plucked my last nerve. And I had to turn on the brother. And I got kind of upset, God. And God, you know what motivated me, but God, maybe I could have handled him. I know how he is. I handled him a little bit. Maybe I need to tell him, Peter, Satan wants you. He's sifting you. But I'm praying for you. And when? Your journey's not through yet, Peter. And I see an end for you that doesn't look like what I talked about yesterday. Now, that may not be in the sequencing of the narrative, but just use this as an example, because I already see a win for you. And I'm praying for that win. And when you get converted, you will teach and help some other folks. Y'all understand? I actually believe Jesus was so in touch with God. No, Jesus was so intimate with God that the two became one, hallelujah, that he never could count his relationship perfectly done, because God, in every moment of this, being with you is the standard of my being. And I've got to acknowledge, God, that there's some stuff that happened today that kind of tore at the fabric of our wholeness. God, forgive me. Notice, if we go back to the snake, Genesis reveals to you 4 levels of separation that occur when you believe the lie. 1 is separation from God. God becomes other, above, and beyond, rather than the God is with you. 2, you get separated from your authentic self. Are you with me? You get separated from your authentic self because you begin to negate and devalue dimensions of your own God giftedness, because a snake has told you you're not in the image of God. The other part of the separation from the self is engendered because your self-understanding is derived from conversations with people other than God. You remember after they had sinned, they hid, and they said, I hide because I'm naked. What was God's question? Who told you that? What can you infer from the question? God is establishing that you have now derived understanding of yourself and your being from a source other than me. God could have also said, I didn't tell you that. It indicates that you have been communing with other powers that are giving you directions for self-understanding that are not a function of God's creative activity. Now, part of this engenders separation from yourself, which is revealed in the anti-somatic body negating syndrome of Western spirituality that makes the body something evil. Come on, you know what? Sex, anything that has to do with your body is what? Nasty, dirty, repress it, get rid of that. You just got broken. God made you in God's image. God, look, listen, God formed your body. All of those desires in you are part of God's gift to you. Now, stay with me, because I'm going where it's not a part of the prepared presentation, okay? And if we don't get to where we want to go, then I'm going to count this as a God-inspired moment. Listen. Who formed your body? God. God looked at your body and said, good. Come on. You remember in Beloved? She says, look at your hands. Look at your feet. Look at your face. This is God's word. God formed your body, right? Your body is a gift. Then why are you taught that your body is a source of sin and evil rather than a gift of God? Then God breathes the breath of life into you. So when you're a whole human being, you are both physical and spiritual. And the breath of God, the Holy Spirit, the Spirit of God, does not kill your body, it animates your body. Being spiritual doesn't kill your body, it brings your body alive. This is a failure in our teaching in the church because we're bringing young people into the spirit and then telling them to kill their body when the spirit they're experiencing is making their body more sensate. It makes the body come alive. There is sensation. You understand what I'm getting at? Now look. So look what we do. In the church, we separate what was together. Come on, body and spirit, and pull them apart. The world says body. The church says spirit. And you set up a war within your creation. Come on. And you live with internal angst because you do not go to church to get healed. You go to church to move to the other side of the split. The snake splits. The church doesn't say, behold. The church says, you need to get out of the world split and get into the spirit split. But after you go to church, you're just as confused, broken, guilt-ridden as you were before you. The demon doesn't care which side of you're split on. So because the concern of the demon is not which split you're in, but to make sure you remain broken. This is what our ancestors begin to understand, and why even things like death, the body is not a sign of distance from the spirit. And immediately when the powers of domination came, They wanted to immediately negate any bodily expression because the body is evil. And body becomes connected with the principle of ignorance. Disembodied people are intelligent. Embodied people are carnal and ignorant. So if you move in your song, we got to do something about that ignorant worship. If you dance, oh, we got to do something about that. Remember, ignorant people bringing all of that ungodly pagan stuff. When you have literally, Jesus' question is, will you be made whole? I come not to destroy, but to heal. I come to sew back together the torn fabric of your existence. It's tragic. We say, by his stripes I'm healed. That means I'll never get sick. No, you've been brought out of a disease of fragmentation. Will you be whole? When I try to teach this, what was the first temptation that came to Jesus after he spent time in the wilderness and affirmed his intimacy with God? Turn these stones into bread. Guess what? We'll read that and miss it. He just spent 40 days with God, has affirmed his commitment to his ministry, and he comes out hungry. Back up. Deep spirituality does not negate physical and biological desires. What is hunger? A biological desire. You can love God and still get hungry. Amen. In my context, I grew up saying, kill that. You don't need hungry. Don't get hungry. Stay away from that bread. Bread is no good for you. No bread. Look at Jesus. Jesus more or less said, yes, I am hungry, but you don't live by bread alone. What he's simply saying is there's nothing wrong with bread. The problem is not created by your bread. It's created when bread begins to consume and control you to the degree there's no longer a connection with the God who gave you the very need for bread. If you begin to understand this, you are adult, can I say this? That means that my body moments become hallelujah moments. That I just don't worship on Sunday, I can worship with my partner. Come on. And I don't have to walk away with regret. I can say, thank you, Jesus. No, stay with me, y'all. Do you understand what I'm saying? But the problem is, when we deal with the fall, the body is something evil. And see, I taught about this in Bible study last night. So many things that the Bible, that the church declares as wrong is not wrong, because it was not the wrong act, it was the wrong season. You know, in Ecclesiastes 3, it says there's a time, a season, a place for everything for the purposes of God. Come on. I even made suggestion to them last night, even when you're called, it may not be your season to step into it. We're studying Nehemiah. It's how do you rebuild and restore a community? And last night it talked about, you know, the first chapter when Nehemiah felt compelled because the city was broken. Last week we talked about how you could have a finished temple. The temple was finished in 515, but 70 years later, the city was still in disrepair. Why is it that you can get so comfortable with a beautiful temple when your city is in absolute chaos? And so in there, I talked about, and it said, but then when you go to the second chapter, it says one day, 4 months later. And you got to realize that God has a one day. That the time of the event of the encounter may not be the time in the moment that you step into action. You got to discern your one day. One day, 4 months later. So the fulfillment of what God has for you may not occur at the time that the revelation of the calling is made in your life. There's a one day. It is comparable to the Kairos moment, the fullness of time. One day, 4 months later, and when he was doing his normal job became the one day where something was revealed that took him to the fulfillment of what God had for him. No, so here's what I'm talking about. It's the same way how we deal with sexuality and things. Sexuality is a gift of God. Thank God. We take the consequences that people experience by expressing the gift out of season to establish the negation of the expression. Do y'all hear what I'm saying? That there's a season. God is not defined by time, but God operates in time. Once you get into season, you occupy time in space. Come on. So it means that there is a time and a place. Once you get into time and place, by the nature of creation, nothing exists in isolation. You're to encounter presences. What you did and what you shared was not wrong, but the issue was created by the time, the place, and the person. Oh, y'all, come on. All right. And we condemn the behavior rather than helping people and guiding them to a celebration of the appropriate time, place, and person. Mm-hmm. So there are a lot of things that where I messed up in my life, y'all. It was actually very good, but it wasn't the right season. It wasn't the right place, and it wasn't with the right group. All right. I'll say been there, done that. All y'all been holy all your life. And immediately the way I tried to fix it is to say, I'm not going to do that anymore. When that was not the problem. The problem was the time, the space, and the person. Okay, all right. That's another lesson. I'm going to have to move on. Praise God. And look. And I'll show you, Jesus said, don't live by bread alone, by mixing with God. Can I show you one other thing that we missed? What's the first piece of armor that you put on? You ask most people in the church, the first thing they'll say is the breastplate of righteousness. No, it's the loincloth of truth. In other words, if you're going to effectively win the battle of faith, you must put on the appropriate armament that equips you for the task. The first piece of armor is a loincloth. Guess what the Bible just told you? The first place you're going to get attacked in this journey of fidelity is at your loin level. Oh, come on, stay with me. And if you're going to claim victory, you better put some truth on your loins. Now, notice that the loincloth is the only piece of armament that is not hard, fixed, and rigid. The loincloth can be removed with one yank of a tie. That's what the Bible just told you. Wrap your loins with truth. Do not bind your loins. Or, can I say this? Castrate and negate your loins. But whenever you're released, make sure they are wrapped in truth. Come on, all right. Can I go see y'all start this mess and it gonna go even deeper? Part of the corrective on the anti-Semitic body negating syndrome of Western spirituality is Mary's body. Now I know the radical feminists to say she was raped and all of that. I don't see it that way. And I see it different. Guess what I see? In the history of the Christian thought, part of the negation and diminution of the female was because of her body, because of her biological function, and because men experienced her as a temptress and they defined her as that. In fact, the woman was not a mental person, not a spiritual person. She was a body person. She was the embodiment. She was a necessary embodiment present for the purpose of reproduction. And her presence distracts men from the higher levels of consciousness characterized by mind and spirit. That's why none of these women should be in seminary, because they messing up the men. Isn't that a terrible statement about men? Praise God. Amen. Now look. Guess what God says? The very place that you see as the woman's liability, her fault, and her failure, I'm going to reveal to you is the place of her beauty. Come on. Because the very loins that you want to negate and use her to victimize her, even to the degree because you don't want her in the pulpit because she has a cycle and she's impure and has to be constantly being purified. I am going to take that very place and birth me. No, y'all didn't hear me. The very place that you call nasty is actually the place of my divine activity and my holy manifestation. Her body is holy ground. Her body is God's space. And if you don't know how to come with the recognition of the holiness of her body, don't expect to come. The virgin birth for me is a radical redefinition of the sanctity of the body, not just for the woman, but for all creation. Know ye not that your body is the temple of the Holy Ghost? Your body, her body, is the very place of God's manifestation. Thank God for her. She can bring the word you preach through her body, and then you don't even want her body in the pulpit. Think about it, y'all. And think about how messed up it is. And then the real tragedy is, how many women get so polluted that they won't even respond to the God of God because they're women. And then when they feel the sense of God, they deny it and say, my man wouldn't approve. My denomination wouldn't approve. Oh, come on. You're in the same position of Mary. I resist divine gifted productivity because it's not authorized by the man power. And that means that I'm not a virgin. I am already penetrated by patriarchal constructs to the degree man is so far in me, I won't let God have me. And really, if you understand Christmas, it's about recovered virginity. God, there are so many places in my, and I'm not talking about going to Saudi Arabia or somebody going through a surgical process to try to recreate some physical condition. I'm talking about when you discover in your life that you have given power to other powers and principalities, to other systems, to define your giftedness, your promise, and your productivity. And you're so busy trying to please those powers, you have not been fully available to God. And at last, when you experience the word of God that says, what happens to you is not by is impossible with man, but with God all things are possible. And you raise holy hands and say, as you will, Lord, let it be. That's recovered virginity. God, I'm fresh for you today. I've been deceived. I've been controlled. I've been used. I've been ignorant. And God, I had dishonored you by not heeding your touch in my life, because I gave the power to the powers. Today, God, as you will, let it be in my life. And see, if you understand that, family, that's not just for the female. I'm teaching the way I teach because I've recovered my virginity. I'm fresh for God. And all of those forces that were teaching me how to think, how to speak, even how to relate to you, no longer have power. Because you are no longer the objects that I release my genius to. Because I got it and you don't. I am the vessel of God, releasing to vessels of God in a moment that may guide all of us to greater fidelity. Sure, Everett, you open that up because it gets so big. And see, again, I'll show you the whole principle of the lie is separation from God, separation from a true self, got this whole discussion about it, but then it's separation from each other. And the model of separation from each other is the fact that the man is over the woman. That is not God's design. How many people this day are still teaching women to believe that the man is their superior and that they have to acknowledge him? Who is, come on, and we start out talking about who the Lord, and we always use terms like what, over, and my husband who is over. No. I celebrate my husband who is my partner in my life, work, love, and ministry. And I celebrate all of you and honor your lives because God has gifted me with you to be my partners who walk. Our whole consciousness is over under. And it's captured in the 3rd chapter of Genesis, where the woman will be subject to man. The church teaches that as God's design when that's the evidence of being cursed. That is a consequence of a snake model, not God's creation. In both creation stories, there was mutuality, reciprocity, and shared relationship and responsibility. In the second story, the first story he names, I create male and female. Come on, I just create human beings. Now, here's how I would interpret it in the broadest way. I create human beings and they are diverse in character. And in all of their diversity, I give them equal responsibility for the carrying of this earth. Then he goes in the second story and he says he names everything good except when he makes a human being who lives in isolation. And so in the second story, he establishes everything is good except the human being I created who is alone. I create for relationship, and the possibility and the maximization of how I made you to be requires that you be in connection with some other life forms, and therefore I will make a woman. Guess what I'm simply saying? I will make partners with you so that together you all may maximize and fulfill what I've desired for you. And the reality is in both stories, it's about relationship. Then why does the church start teaching about somebody being over and under rather than being with? You see what the snakeology has done? Because that same snakeology then is constructed to make white over black. Come on. Can I say it? The young, the older over the young, rather than the mutuality of authentic community. We relate in a graded hierarchy of value, and your value is predicated upon your position in the hierarchy rather than how meaningfully and authentically you invest in the relationship. Mm. Mm. That leads to all kinds of forms of toxicity. And the danger is those of us who commit to liberation, we do not present the new model. We present the inversion of the existing model. Like this, like hell. Come on. No, it's my time. You on the bottom now. As a black man, I ain't trying to get over white folk. Tired of the over-under mess. I'm not so naive that sometimes functions can get so disrupted. There may be forms of conflict and combat. My problem is when you normalize, institutionalize, and divinize the conflict and the hierarchy rather than the purposes of God.
Oh my God.
And so now this is God's way. Can I show you this? We use Christ to create a new religion that's over other people. And that's not the purpose of Christ. We use Christ to create another hierarchy rather than to collapse the hierarchy and create the community that God desired. And so if you're not a Christian, you're the other. But because I know Christ, I see you as God's child. Are you with me? Why is it that everywhere in the Bible, look what we have, look, in creation was a man over a woman, were white people over black in creation? No. In Jesus Christ, was one race over another race, or were men over women? Not in Jesus' message, in the culture he went into, but look at the message, he all the time was overcoming it. Whether it's the woman at the well, come on, whether in particularly in the Lucan narrative, that folk that you consider on the outside become the models of the truth. Come on, I see more faith in these folk that you consider the dog than I do in you when you consider yourself holy. Come on, look, it's not in Jesus. Come on, it's not in Jesus. Does the Holy Spirit create the hierarchy? No. It's tragic that we reduce the Holy Spirit to a cultic phenomena that people begin to use the Holy Ghost to create ranks of value within the body of Christ. Isn't it tragic that we take everything that God does and we use it to create another hierarchy? The Holy Spirit is a radical prophetic moment where the categories of division are collapsed, where different cultures are there. Men and women are empowered. People of different ages are empowered. And you discover that when the Holy Ghost is upon you, you will have the capacity to communicate the lines across the lines of division that have normally separated. That's what the Holy Ghost does. But guess what we do with God? God justifies as a difference between male and female, between religions, between this. Guess what? Jesus came to elevate his religion above all other religions and to denounce and condemn anybody who's not in his religion. And the Holy Spirit came to empower a select group within the body of Christ so they can tell the rest of the folk that they ain't got the Spirit. And even when we get to heaven, powers of division define the future and not the God revealed in Jesus Christ. All right. My God, look what you all have done with my time.
Dr. Kinney, I gotta ask you this. That discourse was awesome and outrageous. Now we know that we are the house divided, that we unknowingly are applying snakeology. In this great university of change in which persons such as yourself and others have walked through there, are we still applying snakeology when we want to separate the theologies instead of us embracing it as one whole?
Yeah. Now, thank you for that. That's a real segue. My one comment would be, we have to be very careful. A true encounter with the liberating God will demand that you're self-critical. And we even have to be careful as Black institutions how we will sit here and talk about all of this, but then establish administrative structure, admission models, evaluative models, assessment models, come on, discourse symbols that are a function of the separation. That is, we recognize something is out of order. We can tell you why it's out of order, but we have not developed the capacity to break out of the order. And that's one of my, can I be honest, that's one of my real struggles as a professor, even now. How do I teach, assess, evaluate, and provide content that is reflective of the vision of the fulfillment rather than the power of the snake? Because there's always going to be folks say, no, this is the way that we do it. Can I make it plain? In the city of Richmond, we just honored Willie Dell, one of our professors' wife, Nathan Dell. She's a wonderful woman of God. But I remember when Blacks assumed the majority on city council. And in the midst of one of the decisions they were making, one of the Black persons says this, why are you getting mad? Because we did it. The white people have been doing it all along. And I remember hearing that and saying, one of the worst reasons for doing anything is because the white people have been doing it all along. Never use the behavior of the one who victimized you to justify a continuation of a behavior that victimizes somebody else. And yes, we have to wrestle. We don't realize how come on, can you all see how vehemently people are defending racism? Racism is a way of life. Our national leadership will not even acknowledge. And they say racism doesn't exist. Just be nice and go to school and you'll get everything you want. Ask some of these sisters who jumped through every hoop you told them to jump through. And they're still just a woman. And women can't have this. Women can't do this. Can I say something? Dr. Wafanaka, I think he did a session with you. Did he talk to you about how masculine toxicity is even rampant in, we talk about Africa and how it's rampant, and how the article that he recently wrote, he argues that even feminist hermeneutics are corrupted by toxic masculinity, because we tend to still interpret the women in the Bible, affirming them through strongman concepts. And we're still taking the same concepts to affirm women using some of the concepts that are an aspect of toxic masculinity. One of the ways that I talk about this is there's a piece that I have in Ella Mitchell's book about surprise, surprise, surprise. And I talk about how the women brought a message and the men said, the women said this, they surprised us with this message. But we called it what? Nonsense. Isn't it amazing when truth is called nonsense because it comes from the wrong vessel? And one of the things I talked about in that is, in some women, in order to escape being assessed as nonsensical, change two things. One or both two things. They change the message, because if I say what the men want to hear, they might affirm me. Or I change my femaleness, because if I act more like a man, maybe they'll see me as one of them. In order to get out of the nonsense judgment, you got to change your biology or your truth. But thanks be to God, there are all these women here who just dare to keep surprising us with the word of truth. He lives. He lives. in all the ways that you constructed the future world, and all of the authority that you gave to the powers of death have been transcended by a presence that I have encountered for myself. He lives. And if that's nonsense, shame on you. He lives. And I ain't gonna become you, and I ain't gonna preach what you preaching. He lives. All right, praise God. All right, we family, look, y'all see what time it is. Oh, y'all, it's a shame what y'all do. Okay, very quickly. Is Tim here? Tim?
Yes, sir.
Can you put up that circular chart? I'm gonna skip the other piece that may be for another time, because I'll let them write their own outlines for constructive theology.
Okay, sir.
Now, okay, thanks a lot. Now, do you see this circle, you all? What I'm beginning to think about is how do we begin to talk about God in this circle form? And what I'm suggesting is, rather, first of all, what do you see? You see God all around us. You see it? He's so wide that no matter where you go, you're inside of God. You're inside of God. Guess what? A Muslim. Come on. Hindu. Come on. Male, female. Sexual orientation. You are inside of God, and nothing can separate you or yank you out of God. You're inside of God. And what I meet, when I meet you somebody in the God circle. And then you'll see the words Christ and charisma. You see, I am working on this to show how you can use it for interfaith and interreligious dialogue. Because God is at the center. And if we can just all agree, if white supremacists and critical race theory folk, and we say we're Christian, can we believe God is at the center? Yes. That means that everything we do, every expression and construction is an outgrowth of the God at the center. So let us have some discussion about how we understand God. And let's go just look. Does God, just start looking at some of the things you're doing. Is that godly? And at some point you're gonna have to say, well, no, that's not godly, but that's what I teach. Okay, but let's agree. Let's see, Charles Long, who is it? Renita Weems, among others. Stacey Floyd Thomas, talk about how this is a God issue. Zora Neale Thurston said this, too many of us create a God that serves our need rather than us committing to fulfilling the desires of God. I'm paraphrasing, but look. God is at the center. In the Christian tradition, revolving around God in your inner circle are what? Christ and charisma. That's just because you all know I use alliteration. It's Christ and the Holy Spirit. That God is made known, the center is creation. God is revealed in Christ. God is revealed in the Holy Spirit. So as a Christian, I affirm that the primordial reference for understanding the fullness of the character of this God is in creation, Christ, and the Holy Spirit, or the Trinity. So therefore, not only do I say God is at the center, if I'm a Christian, then I've got to say, does it line up with Christ? Does it line up with the work and the character of the Holy Spirit? Does it line up with the vision of the future? Is God's desire? God's desire is that none would be lost. So then why do you celebrate that some folk would be lost? Why aren't you talking out of a future where that fulfills God and not the snake? All right. Now, in the beginning, in your creation, you have God's design. In the circle is God's design, and there's God's destiny, the fulfillment of God. And in your circle, there are expressions that relate to this God. There is deliverance and delight that's in the Christ. I don't have time to give you this whole system interpreting these words. And you, guess what? In this circle, there are places of deception, deviation, distortion, division, destruction, and death that creates falling and fragmentation in the circle. And all of us, it's not an above and below, because the circle is movement. And in my own life right now, even as I teach you, I get convicted in places where I am practicing division or bring about death. But another dimension of the circle that God, the Christ, and the Holy Spirit are trying to take us is through a development of discipleship, devolution, deconstruction, toxification, and decolonization. When we fully develop this, the educational process in the Black church is a process not of indoctrination, but of detoxification. We have got to get Black folk out of the lie that is perpetrated and continued by white supremacy. So therefore, when we talk about discipleship, we talk about detoxification. That's what we do in the Black church. We are going to consciously have a process of detoxifying you. Come out. Somebody just put that in the bar, I see it in the chat. That come out from among this that functions to violate the truth of Christ. And so all I'm talking about is that I am working on another model. What I didn't share with you is the sheet. Tim, are you still here?
Yes, sir.
Pull up that other sheet real quick.
Yes, sir.
1 second, let me grab it.
I'm coming.
You good, brother. I appreciate your support and help today.
Yes, sir.
What takes you a few minutes may have taken me the whole class period.
Is that it?
Thank you. Yeah, here you go.
Okay.
God talk with sight and sound of blackness, background, dissonance, discernment, and termination. In the background, what I talk about is that the enslaved people in this country were not tabula rasa. They came with a deep spirituality, a deep sense of God. And they had more God when they got here than the God that was brought to them by white slavery Christianity. Then instead of using the categories of Western spirituality, I use these Ds, the design. In the beginning, God establishes a destiny. God modeled in the beginning what he desires for our future. The principles of creation are not only the elements of the beginning, they are the principles of the end. Mutuality, reciprocity, intrinsic worth and dignity, caring for creation, living in community, even to the degree of giving ourselves that someone else might have life. I breathe, I release my life principle. I see the character of God. And God is diffuse. God is in every element of creation. This is where African scholars like Balaji Aduwu, who would chafe against describing African traditional religions as pagan because they worship all these gods. And he said, we do not worship many gods. We believe in one God. We have a radical monotheism, where the monotheism is so radical that God is diffused in every creation. That our God just doesn't exist here. The God is in the tree. The God is in the water. The God is in the antelope. So therefore, when we kill the antelope, we bow down and thank the God in the antelope and the antelope for giving ourselves that we might have food. And we commit ourselves to ensure that the future there will be antelope, because God is in everything. Everything is diverse. Nothing is the same, that everything is in diverse. No two snowflakes have the exact same design. No two leaves have the exact vein pattern. No two flowers have the same fragrance or the exact same color. No two human beings have the exact same retinal rod configurations, have the exact same fingerprints, DNA marker. While we're so much alike, creation affirms diversity and establishes the principles of destiny. Then in the midst of the marvelous design, there comes deception. And the deception is rooted in the concept of deficiency and distance. from the deception leads to a distortion, which gives rise to the normalization and the actualization of deviation, division, domination, and death. Death means, in the Hebrew, people have done word studies and says you will surely die. It does not mean the cessation of life in a literal sense. It means a condition of separation where the life principle of unity can no longer be experienced and received. In the midst of the distortion, we experience deliverance or delight. This word delight in all of its manifestations, as we talk about this is where you would talk about your Christology. I'm using these because I want to invite people who are not Christians to begin to enter the theological circle and understand what has been done to us. So I don't want to fight with Muslims. I want to talk about, can we affirm a design? Can we begin to see how the deception occurs? Can we see how when the deception gets normalized into distortion? And is there a deliverance? And what does that deliverance look like? Okay, now I use this word delight. I use the word delight, and I only got a couple minutes here because my two grandsons, my grandchildren always spend a period of time with me in the summer. And sometimes I might have 6 or 7 grandchildren, and they go on a vacation with BB and Papa, and they do this and they do that. But when they were here and they turned 12, and I took the night light out of their room, and the room was dark. And early in the night, one of them screamed and said, "Papa, come here, please, hurry." And he laid there and he said, "Papa, it's dark in here." And I said, "You all getting too big now. You don't need all that lightning." And here's what a 12-year-old told to me. He sat up in the bed and he said, "Papa, when you're in the darkness, I don't care how grown you are, you need delight." And he used the Ebonics. You need delight. What is our delight? What is our delight? Jesus, the light of the world. And then we're going to talk about what is the light. What is the light that helps expose the distortion and help us to understand the light has shown in the dark. See, up in that distortion, another word I ought to put there is darkness, has shown in the darkness. The darkness can't put it out. And once we see the light, what does it mean to form other people in the light? That's discipleship. And we got to detoxify, decolonize, dedoctrinate, and devolve. You see, you look up the word devolution or devolution. That is just like you can evolve into a way of life. It reaches a point where you got to evolve from some stuff that's being shaping you. It is maturation in this. It's the growth. It's the development. Then you end up in devotion. You're disentangled, divested, defining, driven, and dangerous. There is, once you really begin to see this family, when you begin to an agent of delight, detoxifying the mess in the church, and you get divested and disentangled from the domination system, and the passion of God drives you to be defining in a relation to God who is at the center, you become dangerous. Dangerous to the point that you will run the risk of crucifixion. You will be viewed as a dangerous threat because you have disrupted the order of the demonic that is bringing division and death. And that's why you have to be sober and vigilant, because they will use various instruments and vehicles. You've heard me say this. If you are so highly favored that you never feel like you're under attack, it is not because you are favored, it's because you're so trifling that your existence is not a threat to the demonic. The reason that so many of us are so comfortable is because we are so compromised with the demonic. The demonic says, "I'll let you be comfortable." But if you ever dare, And can I say this? Even some people who are close to you will say, you've lost the faith. Even folk who used to love you in the church will want you gone. That's why when you become dangerous, you got to make sure that you have enough of a delight that you know how to communicate the truth in a way that people still want you present in the very thing you're trying to detoxify. I always point this out. Wisdom and discernment will always necessitate degrees of knowing how to perform a dance for survival. But you want to make sure that when your dance requires that you come so co-opted, your survival becomes the melody of the funeral dirge. I believe as we get beyond blackness, we've got to bring life to the church. And I refuse to officiate its death. When you become disentangled, I'm arguing that you will see a future that doesn't look like what we are doing in the church right now. That we will join our ancestors and do not send people to hell, but it be angels, agents of life. What I'm working on now is to separate. There will be no division, but there will be consequences in the healing. Can I say this? That literally you don't just get to go enter into the presence of God, but the very presence of God is a very searing reality. In the presence of God, everything will be revealed, and you will have to look at what you've done, and you can't be in denial. You can't sit in Congress and lie like you lie. You can't embrace the lie. The truth is revealed, and that truth will penetrate you to the degree it will create pain as you recognize, oh hell. Not only that, you will be welcomed into a place where the normative criteria and the principles of your worldview will no longer be operative to the degree that you will no longer have status. Right now, white people are angry because there's a possibility that their status, privilege, and power could be taken away from them by the fulfillment of God's design. What happens if you go to heaven and you've been racist, you've been sexist, you've been brutal, you've been evil, but now there is no more sickness, no more evil, no more dying. Here's what I'm working on, and y'all please give me credit, that you're literally in a domain where your power and the way you've operated is been stripped and no longer has authority. And that will create the gnashing of teeth and the burning of fire, because you no longer have a throne. Because what brought you joy no longer exists. And the power of the goodness of God creates your pain. And you say, this is hell. Because your greatest pain is you discover that God doesn't act like you. And the future you thought you would control is ruled by the power of a God that obviates everything that makes you comfortable. But my brother and sister, white, black, whoever you are, whatever you've done, I'll see you with God. And we'll all be together with God. And my prayer is, I want you to know the joy of your salvation. Because this mess is not going to be acceptable. Do you ever see how mad supremacists get when they aren't in charge? That's hell for them. Just a thought. Because I'm afraid that we've constructed the future based upon the modalities, the categories, and the principalities of fallenness rather than the revelation of God that we affirm in creation, Jesus Christ and the Holy Spirit. These are the musings of a constructive theologian. As we put God at the center, let me end with just one story, because I'm already 2 minutes over. And for me, when we give a time, that's an implied covenant, and I don't want to violate a covenant that I made with you. In my experience of Dean, some of my students have heard me tell this story. I had a student years ago, and my students know, don't bring me issues before class. Just like the parishioners know, don't come to me with problems before I'm getting ready to go in the pulpit. Don't come to me with some deep discussion. Let me focus, okay? My students know that before my class, I like to just have my time, because literally, I'm not somebody who, when I lecture, I don't read from a script. I've tried to internalize this and being able to release it. I use scripts when I'm trying to quote folk or direct you to a source. Student came banging on my door. Bam, bam, bam. Dr. Kinney, Dr. Kinney, I need to see you. I said, okay, what's wrong? Come in. He said, I'm sorry to disturb you, but I need to see you. I need to tell you this right now, and you need to hear it from my mouth. I said, okay, what's going on? He said, me and my wife are through. It's over. It's done, and I don't want you to hear it from somewhere else so that it might affect my status here. I'm through. I said, okay, what happened? His wife was an international airline attendant, and she was gone for periods of time and home. She was happened to be home that weekend. And I said, yes, what's going on? He said, Saturday, I was working on something, and she was talking to me, and I kept working on my stuff. I had to work on stuff. And she said to me, baby, I'm gone a lot. And when I'm here, you're not here. Can you just be here for a little while? And I said, well, what did you say to her? I said to her, I was working something in the Bible. I took my Bible and I held it and I said, look, baby, God comes first and you come second. And I said, and what did she say? She said, you and your God go to hell. And that was the end of it. We're through. We're over. Doc, I need a woman who can support me in this ministry. I don't want somebody to tell my God to go to hell. I need somebody to support me. And I immediately thought how tragic it is, how we use God to abuse people that we ought to show love to and care. How we use God as justification for abuse. And so after just reflecting, I said to him, you didn't hear her. What she didn't say, tell God to go to hell. She said, you and you go to hell. Because in your response, you let her know the only God you got is you. She brought to you a little legitimate concern for care, love, and attention. And what you said was, what you need from me does not matter. And so she told you to go to hell because the only God you got is you. He stopped. Whoa, D, what could I have said? What could I? I said, you could have said to her, I know I've been very busy and I hear you. But I want you to know God is first in my life. And since God is first in my life, I don't want you to ever feel second to anything or anybody, because how I treat you is an expression of my relationship with God. And that's when I begin to think God does not create hierarchies where you're taught in your ministerial training, God first, the family second, the church. God doesn't create hierarchies. God is at the center in everything I do, is an extension of that relationship with God. Don't ever put anything or anybody. The church is not third. I want a pastor like somebody who has God at the center. And today, my desire was to teach you using every dimension of our being, our minds, our bodies, and our hearts in such a fashion that you would see that God is at the center of our doing. My prayer would simply be that today, in your learning moment, you experienced God at the center. Bless you. I'm through.